False professors. They feared the Lord and served their own gods. 2 Kings 17:33. When the 10 tribes of Israel were carried away captive by the king of Assyria, their places were supplied with strangers of different idolatrous nations, who knew nothing of the religion of the Jews. Very soon the wild beasts increased in the country, and the lions destroyed multitudes of the people, and they thought it was because they did not know the God of the country, and had therefore ignorantly transgressed his religion, and offended him, and he had sent the lions among them as a punishment. So they applied to the king, who told them to get one of the priests of the Israelites to teach them the manner of the God of the land. They took this advice, and obtained one of the priests to come to Bethel, and teach them the religious ceremonies and modes of worship that had been practiced there. And he taught them to fear Jehovah as the God of that country. But still they did not receive him as the only God. They feared him, that is, they feared his anger and his judgments, and to avert these they performed the prescribed rites, but they served their own gods. They kept up their idolatrous worship, and this was what they loved and preferred, though they felt obliged to pay some reverence to Jehovah as the God of that country. There are still multitudes of persons professing to fear God, and perhaps possessing a certain kind of the fear of the Lord, who nevertheless serve their own gods. They have other things to which their hearts are supremely devoted, and other objects in which they mainly put their trust. These are, as you know, two kinds of fear. There is that fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom, which is founded in love. There is also a slavish fear, which is a mere dread of evil, and is purely selfish. This is the kind of fear which is possessed by those people spoken of in the text. They were afraid Jehovah would send his judgments upon them if they did not perform certain rites, and this was the motive they had for paying him worship. Those who have this fear are supremely selfish, and while they profess to reverence Jehovah, have other gods whom they love and serve. There are several classes of persons to whom this is applicable, and my object tonight is to describe some of them in such a way that those of you here who possess this character may know yourselves and may see how it is that your neighbors know you and understand your real characters. To serve a person is to be obedient to the will and devoted to the interests of that individual. It is not properly called serving where only certain acts are performed without entering into the service of the person, but to serve is to make it a business to do the will and promote the interest of that person. To serve God is to make religion the main business of life. It is to devote one's self, heart, life, powers, time, influence, and all to promote the interests of God, to build up the kingdom of God, and to advance the glory of God. Who are they who, while they profess to fear the Lord, serve their own gods? I answer first, all those of you who have not heartily and practically renounced the ownership of your possessions and given them up to God. It is self-evident that if you have not done this, you are not serving God. Suppose a gentleman were to employ a clerk to take care of his store, and suppose the clerk were to continue to attend to his own business, and when asked to do what is necessary for his employer, who pays him his wages, he should reply, "I really have so much business of my own to attend to that I have no time to do these things." Would not everybody cry out against such a servant and say he was not serving his employer at all? His time is not his own, it is paid for, but he served himself, and he but served himself. So where a man has not renounced the ownership of himself, not only in thought, but practically, he has not taken the first lesson in religion. He is not serving the Lord, but serving his own gods. 2. That man who does not make the business in which he is engaged a part of his religion does not serve God. You hear a man say, "Sometimes I am so much engaged all day in the world or in worldly business that I have not time to serve God." He thinks he serves God a little while in the morning, and then attends to his worldly business. That man, you may rely on it, left his religion where he said his prayers. He is willing, perhaps, to give God the time before breakfast, before he gets ready to go to his own business. And as soon as that is over, away he goes to his own work. He fears the Lord enough, perhaps, to go through his prayers night and morning, but he serves his own gods. That man's religion is the laughing stock of hell. He prays very devoutly, and then instead of engaging in his business for God, he is serving himself. No doubt the idols are well satisfied with the arrangement, but God is wholly displeased. 3. But again, those of you are serving your own gods who devote to Jehovah that which costs you little or nothing. There are many who make religion consist in certain acts of piety that do not interfere with their selfishness. You pray in the morning in your family because you can do it then very conveniently, but do not suffer the service of Jehovah to interfere with the service of your gods, or to stand in the way of your getting rich, or enjoying the world. The gods you serve make no complaint of being slighted or neglected for the service of Jehovah. 4. All that class are serving their own gods who suppose that the 6 days of the week belong to themselves, and that the Sabbath only is God's day. Commentary. I love this. I love how, see, I used to call this the compartmentalization of God. I know it's a really weird word expression, but I know other people have used it as well. Compartmentalizing God to Sunday, you know, and you're practically atheistic the other 6 days of the week. So Monday to Saturday is a completely agnostic mind frame. Like there's literally no talk of God in the house at all. But then on Sunday, oh, all of a sudden you're religious, you know. Now, I understand that it's in the Ten Commandments you keep the Sabbath day holy. I understand that, but you're supposed to walk with the Lord all days of the week. Talk with the Lord all days of the week. That's called a relationship with God. That's called living by faith. That's called walking in holiness. But the Sunday, you know, Sunday is God's day, you know. That's compartmentalizing God. You don't have a relationship with God. That's just religious hypocrisy. That's all that is. All right. So that's what he's talking about here. I'm going to continue. 4. All that class are serving their own gods who suppose that the 6 days of the week belong to themselves and that the Sabbath only is God's day. There are multitudes who suppose that the week is man's time and the Sabbath only God's, and that they have a right to do their own work during the week and to serve themselves and promote their own interests if they will only keep the Sabbath strictly and serve God on the Sabbath. For instance, a celebrated preacher, in illustrating the wickedness of breaking the Sabbath, used this illustration. Suppose a man having $7 in his pocket should meet a beggar in great distress and give him $6, keeping only one for himself, and the beggar, seeing that he retained $1, should return and rob him of that. Would not every heart despise his baseness? You see, it embodies this idea that it is very ungrateful to break the Sabbath, since God has given to men 6 days for their own, to serve themselves, and only reserve the Sabbath to himself. And to rob God of the seventh day is base ingratitude. You that do this do not serve God at all. If you are selfish during the week, you are selfish altogether. To suppose you had any real piety would imply that you were converted every Sabbath and unconverted every Monday. If a man would serve himself all the week and really possess religion on the Sabbath, he requires to be converted for it. But is this the idea of the Sabbath, that it is a day to serve God and exclusive of other days? Is God in need of your services on the Sabbath to keep his work on? God requires all your services as much on the 6 days as on the Sabbath, only he has appropriated the Sabbath to peculiar duties and required its observance as a day of rest from bodily toil and from those fatiguing cares and labors that concern the present world. But because God uses means in accomplishing his purposes, and men have bodies as well as souls, and the gospel is to be spread and sustained by the things of this world, therefore God requires you to work all the 6 days at your secular employments, but it is all for his service, as much as the worship of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is no more given for the service of God than Monday. You have no more right to serve yourselves on Monday than you have on the Sabbath. If any of you have thus considered the matter, and imagine that the 6 days of the week were your own time, it shows that you are supremely selfish. I beg of you not to consider that in prayer and on the Sabbath you are serving God at all, if the rest of the time you are considered as serving yourself. You have never known the radical principle of serving the Lord. Commentary. Notice that the backdrop of the economics of all of this is 1800s America, where self-employment was 80% of the business world, which is something that I came to learn by studying Irvin Wiley's book, The Self-Made Man in America. Yeah, before the Industrial Revolution, in other words. Self-employment was 80% of the business world, mom and pop shops. And he's talking about that. He's saying, look, you guys who have your own businesses can actually serve the Lord 7 days a week because you're not living in corporate America. Finney didn't even know what corporate America was. They didn't exist back then. Large corporations didn't exist like that back then, unless you were like working on a ship or something. Most of the time, no. I mean, factories existed back then, but it wasn't. That was like 10% of the economy back then. This idea of corporate America, where you have these large organizations, and it's like 70% of the job market is these large corporations. That didn't exist back in the time of Finney. It wasn't like that. It wasn't proportioned like that. It was more, mom and pop shops with, 2 or 3 people, fathers and sons. That's, Sanford and Sons, essentially something or another and Sons. I mean, that's the way it was back then. And so what he's saying is that these family businesses were the majority of the business world in New York, and as such, these father slash founder owner CEOs of these small family businesses had it well within their power to be able to operate their weekly business ethics, their daily business ethics, according to Christian principles, according to The Religious Tradesman by Richard Steele. There was not this constant secular pressure to flirt and cuss, flirt and cuss, flirt and cuss, flirt and cuss, lie, cheat, and steal, flirt and cuss, right? But what he's saying is that people did this of their own free will anyway, even though they went to church on Sunday. And he's saying these people are basically serving pagan gods throughout the week. And they have it well within their power not to. 5. Those are serving themselves or their own gods who will not make any sacrifices of personal ease and comfort in religion. For instance, there are multitudes who object to free churches on this ground, that they require a sacrifice of personal gratification. They talk like this: we wish to sit with our families, or we want our seats cushioned, or we always like to sit in the same place. They admit that free churches are necessary in order to make the gospel accessible to the thousands that are going to hell in this city. But they cannot make these little sacrifices to throw open the doors of God's house to this mass of impenitent sinners. Commentary. So here he's talking about people who refuse to leave the Church of England or the Episcopal Church for the sake of the fact that it's so nice looking and comfortable and all this. They would rather sit in a comfortable, fancy church with lukewarm preaching than to go to some low church, free church where hardcore preaching about hell is going on. Okay. I continue. These little things often indicate most clearly the state of men's hearts. Suppose your servant were to say, I cannot do this, or I cannot do that, because it interferes with his personal ease and comfort. He cannot do this because he likes to sit on a cushion and work. Or he cannot do that because it would separate him from his family an hour and a half. What? Is that doing service? When a man enters into service, he gives up his ease and comfort for the interest and at the will of his employer. It is true that any man is supremely devoted to the service of God when he shows that his own ease and comfort are dearer than the kingdom of Jesus Christ. Let me just repeat this and backpedal. Okay. Is it true that any man is supremely devoted to the service of God when he shows that his own ease and comfort are dearer than the kingdom of Jesus Christ, and that he would sooner sacrifice the salvation of sinners than sit on a hard seat or be separated from his family for an hour or two? 6. Those are serving their own gods who give their time and money, when they do give, grudgingly, by constraint and not of a ready mind, and with a cheerful heart. What would you think of your servant if you had to done or drive all the time to do anything for your interest? Would you not say that he was an eye servant? Many people there are who, when they do anything on account of religion, do it grudgingly. If they do anything, it comes hard. If you go to one of these characters and want his time or his money for any religious object, it is difficult to get him engaged. It seems to go across the grain and is not easy or natural. It is plain he does not consider the interests of Christ's kingdom the same with his own. He may make a show of fearing the Lord, but he serves some other gods of his own. 7. Those who are always ready to ask how little they may do for religion rather than how much they may do are serving their own gods. There are multitudes of persons who seem always to ask how little they can get along with in what they do for God. You hear such a man making up his accounts of profit and loss. So much made this year, then so much it costs for charity, so much obliged to give for religion. Obliged to give for the interests of religion? And so much lost by fire, and so much by bad debts, and so on. Is that man serving God? It is a simple matter of fact that you have never set your hearts on the object of promoting religion in the world. If you had, you would ask, how much can I do for this object and for that? Cannot I do so much, or so much, or so much? 8. They who are laying up wealth for their families to elevate and aggrandize them are serving gods of their own, and not Jehovah. Those who are thus aiming to elevate their own families into a different sphere by laying up wealth for them, show that they have some other object to live for than bringing this world under the authority of Jesus Christ. They have other gods to serve. They may pretend to fear the Lord, but they serve their own gods. Commentary. He's talking about God versus mammon there. You cannot serve both God and money. In other words, luxury versus, right? Luxury versus Christianity, right? It's essentially what is meant by that. 9. Those who are making it their object to accumulate so much property that they can retire from business and live at ease are serving their own gods. Commentary. Whoa. Finney is preaching against retirement. Do you hear that? He's saying that if you're saving for retirement, you're serving a false god. Saving for retirement is idolatry, according to Finney. Dude, food for thought. Food for thought. I'm going to continue. There are many persons who profess to be the servants of God, but are eagerly engaged in gathering property and calculating to retire to their country seat by and by and live at their ease. What do you mean? God has given you a right to a perpetual Sabbath as soon as you have made so much money? Did God tell you, when you profess to enter his service, to work hard so many years, and then you might have a perpetual holiday? Did he promise to excuse you after that from making the most of your time and talents, and let you live at ease the rest of your days? If your thoughts are set upon this notion, I tell you, you are not serving God, but your own selfishness and sloth. Whoa, Finney! Man! I had always wondered about the retirement doctrine that exists in America, and I mean, here he finally preaches against it. Here he's finally preaching against it. Now, what about the story of the prodigal son? Larry Burkett brings this out. What about Abraham? Both of them are giving inheritances to their son. True, but there is no sign that either Abraham or the prodigal son's father, who gave inheritance to the son, while alive, there is no sign that either of them retired from business. And these are always the examples in the Bible that they point to of men who gave inheritances to their kids. True, they gave the inheritance to their kids while alive. I'm not sure if Abraham's inheritance was given while alive, but they did not retire from business. They did not retire from business, most likely from cattle herding, from being cattle farmers and things like that. So here's Finney preaching against retirement and saying it's idolatry and is nothing but selfishness and sloth. Wow, Finney, that's pretty hardcore. That's some pretty hardcore thinking right there. You know, I'm glad he said that, because I have studied. I completed an almost 400-page book called Biblical Economics, and I went through all of Wesley's sermons on money, and I still to this day, question whether or not the American concept of retirement is really all that biblical. I really, really question it. I really, really question that. When I look into the Bible and I look at a 70, 80, and 90-year-old man, I see him still working. I do. I see him working at his own business, in whatever capacity that is. He works until his dying day, in some way, shape, or form. You know, does that mean we shouldn't set up securities for ourselves? No. But if it means taking a perpetual holiday, as the man said, and not serving God, but your own selfishness and sloth, right? Think about that. As you approach your final years, these should be the years that are the most spiritual, right? Because you're preparing for death, right? And yet, the retirement idea means that these are going to be the most carnal years of your life. So literally, you're increasing your likelihood of damnation by indulging in carnality in your last days, and you die in a state of carnality, right? And that's what I've always come to question the retirement idea over, is that the retirement idea seems to increase a person's carnality at those years in which they're have the most chance of dying any moment, or dying in their sleep because they're aging. Right? These are the years that the most Bible study should be going on, the most prayer life, seeking God should be going on. Um, and mortification of the body should be going on, and work is one of those mortifications. Now, um, if you work too hard in your old age, you could burn out the candle faster. So, but there's always something you can do. You could work on the computer from home or something. There's always something you can do. You know, as they say that uh, the I want to get this quote right because I keep on referring to it. Um, Idle hands uh, are the devil's workshop. Idle hands are the devil's tools. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. Think about that. Think about that next time you think about retirement, right? Idle hands are the devil's workshop, right? Idle hands are the devil's workshop. I'm not saying that you need to go back into what was formerly a very, very oppressive workplace. But idle, it still remains the truth. Idle hands are the devil's workshop, right? So I would say that if you're in your 70s, you're in your 80s, you're in your 90s, think of something that you can handle, something really low key that you can handle, and you can still just don't want to have idle hands. You could work from your computer. There's all kinds of things you can do work from your computer as an old man. Uh, and I've seen some old men are they're contractors in one way, shape, or form, where they have, you know, they're self-employed and they might have a pickup truck in their own business and a sign on the side of their pickup truck, and they go, you know, like a handyman. You know, idle hands are the devil's workshop. You might say, but I'm retired. I'm retired. I've been working all these years to be retired. It's not biblical. It's not biblical. It might be biblical to decrease the amount of labor you're doing, right, to take care of your health. But to completely cease from labor, what does the Bible say? 6 days shall a man work, and on the seventh day he shall rest, except when he's 70, 80, and 90 years old. No, right? It's a perpetual commandment. 6 days shall a man work, and on the seventh day he shall rest, except when he turns 65. What? Yeah, retirement's not biblical. It's anti-biblical. It's anti-biblical. And finally, I got that validation and confirmation from Charles Finney. Here he is preaching against it, saying it's nothing but selfishness and sloth, and that it's not commanded. The Sabbath commandment, it goes totally against it. What is expected in the Sabbath commandment of the Ten Commandments? The seventh day you shall rest, right? Not when you turn 65 you cease from all work. It goes against the commandment of the Sabbath. Yeah, here's Charles Finney preaching against retirement in his sermon, False Professors, point 9. Good on you, Charles Finney. And I'm going to continue. Point 10. Those persons are serving their own gods who would sooner gratify their appetites than deny themselves things that are unnecessary or even hurtful for the sake of doing good. You find persons that greatly love things that do them no good, and others even form an artificial appetite for a thing positively loathsome, and after it they will go, and no arguments will prevail upon them to abandon it for the sake of doing good. Are such persons absorbed in the service of God? No, certainly not. Will they sacrifice their lives for the kingdom of God? Why, you cannot make them even give up a quid of tobacco, a weed that is injurious to health and loathsome to society. They cannot give it up, were it to save a soul from death. Who does not see that selfishness predominates in such persons? It shows the astonishing strength of selfishness. You often see the strength of selfishness showing itself in some such little thing more than in things that are greater. The real state of a man's mind stands out, that self-gratification is the law of his life, so strongly that it will not give place, even in a trifle, to those great interests for which he ought to be willing to lay down his life. 11. Those persons who are most readily moved to action by appeals to their own selfish interests show that they are serving their own gods. You see what motive influences such a man. Suppose I wish to get him to subscribe for building a church. What must I urge? Why, I must show how it will improve the value of his property, or advance his party, or gratify his selfishness in some other way. If he is more excited by these motives than he is by a desire to save perishing souls and advance the kingdom of Christ, you see that he has never given himself up to serve the Lord. He is still serving himself. He is more influenced by his selfish interests than by all those benevolent principles on which all religion turns. The character of a true servant of God is right opposite to this. Take the case of two servants, one devoted to his master's interests, and the other having no conscience or concern but to secure his wages. Go to one, and he throws into the shade all personal considerations, and enlists with heart and soul in achieving the object. The other will not act unless you present some selfish motive, unless you say, "Do so, and I will raise your wages or set you up in business," or the like. Is there not a radical difference between these two servants? Is not this an illustration of what actually takes place in our churches? Propose a plan of doing good that will cost nothing, and they will all go for it. But propose a plan which is going to affect their personal interest, to cost money, or take up time in a busy season, and you will see they begin to divide. Some hesitate, some doubt, some raise objections, and some resolutely refuse. Some enlist at once, because they see it will do great good. Others stand back till you devise some means to excite their selfishness in its favor. What causes the difference? Some of them are serving their own gods. 12. Those are of this character who are more interested in other subjects than in religion. If you find them more ready to talk on other subjects, more easily excited by them, more awake to learn the news, then they are serving their own gods. What multitudes are more excited by the bank question, or the question about war, or about the fire, or anything of a worldly nature, than about revivals, missions, or anything connected with the interests of religion? You find them all engaged about politics or speculation, but if you bring up the subject of religion, they are afraid of excitement, and they talk about animal feeling, showing that religion is not the subject that is nearer to their hearts. A man is always most easily excited on that subject that lies nearest his heart. Bring that up, and he is interested. When you can talk early and late about the news and other worldly topics, and when you cannot possibly be interested in the subject of religion, you know that your heart is not in it. And if you pretend to be a servant of God, you are a hypocrite. Dang. 13. When persons are more jealous for their own fame than for God's glory, it shows that they live for themselves and serve their own gods. You see a man more vexed or grieved by what is said against him than against God? Whom does he serve? Who is his God, himself or Jehovah? There is a minister thrown into a fever because somebody has said a word derogatory to his scholarship, or his dignity, or his infallibility, while he is as cool as ice at all the indignities thrown upon the blessed God. Is that man a follower of Paul, willing to be considered a fool for the cause of Christ? Did that man ever take the first lesson in religion? If he had, he would rejoice to have his name cast out as evil for the cause of religion. No, he is not serving God. He is serving his own gods. 14. Those are serving their own gods who are not making the salvation of souls the great and leading object of their lives. The end of all religious institutions, that which gives value to them all, is the salvation of sinners. The end for which Christ lives, and for which he has left his church in the world, is the salvation of sinners. This is the business which God sets his servants about, and if any man be not doing this as his business, as the leading and main object of his life, he is not serving Jehovah, he is serving his own gods. 15. Those who are doing but little for God or who bring but little to pass for God cannot properly be said to serve him. Suppose you ask a professed servant of God, "What are you doing for God? Are you bringing anything to pass? Are you instrumental in the conversion of any sinners? Are you making impressions in favor of religion or helping forward the cause of Christ?" He replies, "Why, I do not know. I have a hope. I sometimes think I do love God, but I do not know that I am doing anything in particular at present." Is that man serving God, or is he serving his own gods? "I talk to sinners sometimes," he says, "but they do not seem to feel much." Then you do not feel. If your heart be not in it, no wonder you cannot make sinners feel. Whereas if you do your duty with your heart in the work, sinners cannot help feeling. 16. Those who seek for happiness in religion rather than for usefulness are serving their own gods. Their religion is entirely selfish. They want to enjoy religion and are all the while inquiring how they can get happy frames of mind and how they can be pleasurably excited in religious exercises. And they will go only to such meetings and sit only under such preaching as will make them happy, never asking the question whether that is the way to do the most good or not. Now suppose your servant should do so, and be constantly contriving how to enjoy himself, and if he thought he could be most happy in the parlor, stretched on the sofa, with a pillow of down under his head, and another servant to fan him, refusing to do the work which you set him about, and which your interest urgently requires, instead of manifesting a desire to work for you, and a solicitude for your own interest, and a willingness to lay himself out with all his powers in your service, he only wants to be happy. It is just so with those professed servants of Jehovah, who want to do nothing but sit in their handsome cushion and have their minister feed them. Instead of seeking how to do good, they are only seeking to be happy. Their daily prayer is not, like that of the converted Saul of Tarsus, "Lord, what wilt thou have me to do?" but, "Lord, tell me how I can be happy." Is that the spirit of Jesus Christ? No, he said, "I delight to do thy will, O God." Is that the spirit of the Apostle Paul? No, he threw off his upper garments at once and made his arms bare for the field of labor. 17. Commentary. Let me also say this. Let me say this. The field of labor. What is the field of labor today? Ask yourself that. What is the field of labor? Did you have the Holy Spirit come in you during worship, and did you really be like, "Oh man, I got to save some sinners from hell"? Okay, okay. Did you make inquiries? Have you made enough inquiries to find out what the true situation of the church is on how you can save sinners from hell most effectively? Oh, you have you? Then you found that most ministers don't care. You found that most ministers will ignore you. You found that most ministers would be competitive to you and say, "Why don't you sit down and listen for about 7 years?" Right? They don't care. And they don't want you to care. They want you to sit down and listen. So what are you going to do about that? Either A, you become a street preacher, or B, you become a street preacher and you do other things to try to figure out how to reach as many people as possible on your own. That's what Martin Luther did. That's what John Wesley did. That's what Charles Finney himself did. And lots of other people who have been touched by God. You can't let the complacency of others determine whether or not you're going to do anything for God. Because sinners need to be saved from hell. Period. No matter what. 17. Those who make their own salvation their supreme object in religion are serving their own gods. There are multitudes in the church who show by their conduct and even avow in their language that their leading object is to secure their own salvation, and their grand determination is to get their own souls planted on the firm battlements of the heavenly Jerusalem and walk the golden fields of Canaan above. If the Bible is not in error, all such characters will go to hell. Their religion is pure selfishness, and he that will save his life shall lose it, and he that will lose his life for my sake shall save it. Conclusion. 1. See why so little is accomplished in the world for Jesus Christ. It is because there are so few that do anything for it. It is because Jesus Christ has so few real servants in the world. How many professors do you suppose there are in this church or in your whole acquaintance that are really at work for God and making a business of religion and laying themselves out to advance the kingdom of Christ? The reason why religion advances no faster is that there are so few to advance it and so many to hinder it. Commentary. Wow. So many to hinder it. And I would put pastors in that category. And I would think that he's thinking about that as well. That there are so many pastors that hinder the spread of the gospel by the attitude that they have towards evangelistically and prophetically minded people in their church. They hinder true lordship salvation from spreading around because they have a competitive or ignoring attitude towards evangelistically minded church members. Yeah, they hinder that. They hinder the work of the evangelist from blossoming out of their church. I'm going to continue here. You see a parcel of people at a fire, trying to get out of the goods of a store. Trying to get out the goods of a store. Some are determined to get out the goods, but the rest are not engaged about it, and they divert their attention by talking about other things, or positively hinder them by finding fault with their way of doing it, or by holding them back. So it is in the church. Those who are desirous of doing the work are greatly hindered by the backwardness, the cavils, and the positive resistance of the rest. Wow! Finney, you just described my experience in the past 24 years since I've been a Christian. Just want to save sinners from hell, dude. It's just that simple. And yet no pastor will help you do this. They just say, sit down in the pew and listen to what I have to say. That's their game plan. 2. See why so few Christians have the spirit of prayer. How can they have the spirit of prayer? What should God give them the spirit of prayer for? Suppose a man engaged in his worldly schemes, and that God should give that man the spirit of prayer. Of course, he would pray for that which lies nearest to his heart, that is, for success in his worldly schemes, to serve his own gods with. Will God give him the spirit of prayer for such purposes? Never. Let him go to his own gods for a spirit of prayer, but let him not expect Jehovah to bestow the spirit of prayer while he is serving his own gods. Our commentary. So what's the spirit of prayer? The spirit of grace and supplications in Zechariah 12:10. And basically, what is that? It's a prayer burden to say for the prayer. It's intercession. It's a desire to pray for the lost, like when Moses interceded for the people of Israel. Lord, please do not take them. Take me instead. Right. It's a self-sacrificing desire to, you can see for a moment prophetically the spiritually lost condition of the people that you're praying for, and you aim your prayers at that. You become burdened about it. You could pray for days for it, hours for it. Sometimes they'll call it a prayer burden. It's the spirit of prayer, right? 3. You see that there are a multitude of professors of religion that have not begun to be religious yet. Said a man to one of them, do you feel that your property and your business are all God's? And do you hold and manage them for God? Oh, no, said he, I have not got so far as that yet. Not got so far as that? That man has been a professor of religion for years, and yet had not got so far as that to consider his property and business and all that he had as belonging to God. No doubt he was serving his own gods. For I insist upon it, that this is the very beginning of religion. What is conversion but turning from the service of the world to the service of God? And yet this man had not found out that he was God's servant. And he seemed to think he was getting a great way in religion, to feel that all he had was the Lord's. Commentary. So basically, Finney is saying, sign of the fish, right? You've seen these businesses with the fish sign, right, on their pickup truck or whatever, or on their van, right? Those are people who have Christian businesses. And that's what Finney's talking about. He's like, self-employed, family business, Christian business, follows Christian business ethics. Whether it's something big like Hobby Lobby or something small, like a 3-person family business. This is what Finney's talking about. It's like, this is the way business is supposed to be, right? The apostles, if they had any businesses, would have done it that way. 4. It is great dishonesty for persons to profess to serve the Lord and yet in reality serve themselves. You who are performing religious duties from selfish motives are in reality trying to make God your servant. If your own interest be the supreme object, all your religious services are only desires to induce God to promote your interests. Why do you pray, or keep the Sabbath, or give your property for religious objects? You answer, for the sake of promoting my own salvation. Indeed, not to glorify God, but to get to heaven. Do not you think the devil would do all that if he thought he could gain his end by it, and be a devil still? The highest style of selfishness must be to get God with all his attributes enlisted in the service of your mighty self. And now, my hearers, where are you all? Are you serving Jehovah, or are you serving your own gods? Have you been doing these 6 months? How have you been doing these 6 months that I have been absent? Have you done anything for God? Have you been living as servants of God? Is Satan's kingdom weakened by what you have done? Could you say now, come with me, and I will show you this and that sinner converted, or this and that backslider reclaimed, or this and that weak saint strengthened and aided? Could you bring living witnesses of what you have done in the service of God? Or would your answer be, I have been meeting regularly on the Sabbath and heard a great deal of good preaching, and I have generally attended the prayer meetings, and we had some precious meetings, and I have prayed in my family, and twice or thrice a day in my closet, and read the Bible. And in all that you have been merely passive as to do anything for God. You have feared the Lord and served your own gods. Yes, but I have sold so many goods and made so much money, of which I intend to give a tenth of to the missionary cause. Who hath required this at your hand, instead of saving souls? Going to send the gospel to the heathen and letting sinners right under your own eyes down to hell? Going to send the gospel to the heathen and letting sinners right under your own eyes go down to hell? Be not deceived. If you loved souls, if you were engaged to serve God, you would think of souls here and do the work of God here. What should we think of a missionary going to the heathen, who had never said a word to sinners around him at home? Does he love souls? There is burlesque in the idea of sending such a man to the heathen. The man that will do nothing at home is not fit to go to the heathen. And he that pretends to be getting money from missions, while he will not try to save sinners here, is an outrageous hypocrite. Commentary. Yeah, I mean, what about those people outside the strip club? He's saying, what about those people outside the strip club, dude? Are you thinking about what's going on in Africa? Are you thinking about what's going on in India? What about those people outside the strip club? They're going down to hell. What are you doing to save those people? Dude, that's convicting. God bless you out there. This is John with WesleyGospel.com.